Hello friends, before we dive right into today's story, tell me, do you enjoy listening with a cup of coffee, or is tea your thing? Here I'm helping you discover new vocabulary, practice your listening, and enjoy the beauty of storytelling. Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I love reading your comments. I still remember the first day I walked into the new classroom. The smell of chalk dust floated in the air, mixed with the faint odor of old wood, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Rows of desks stretched out before me, each scratched with years of names and secret messages carved by students who came before. The fluorescent lights above flickered now and then, creating small shadows that danced across the room like restless ghosts. And then there was him. He stood at the front of the class, his tall figure leaning ever so slightly forward, as if he wanted to loom over everyone. His dark suit looked out of place, too formal, too stiff for a simple teacher. His eyes, though, were what caught me. Two piercing black eyes that seemed to see through me, not at me. He didn't blink much. He didn't smile either. The whole room felt colder when his gaze fell on me, as if someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. "Welcome," he said finally, his voice low and dragging, like each word carried weight. The class fell silent instantly. Even the air felt heavy, as though we all were being forced to breathe slower in his presence. That was my first encounter with Mr. Harrow, the man who would become not just my teacher, but the most unsettling figure of my teenage years. People say some teachers inspire, others bore, but Mr. Harrow, he frightened. At first, I thought maybe it was just me overreacting. After all, I was the new kid in school, still trying to fit in. But as the days passed, I noticed the strange way the classroom worked around him. Students rarely spoke unless asked a question. Even the confident ones who usually cracked jokes or whispered during lessons kept quiet. It wasn't respect. It was fear, a silent agreement that in his class you never tested limits. One afternoon, when the autumn sky outside had turned gray and the trees bent in the wind, he called on me. "You," he said, pointing his long finger in my direction. "Read the passage on page 47. His voice echoed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. My hands shook slightly as I opened the textbook, my voice cracking at the first sentence. As I read, I dared to glance up, and found his eyes fixed on me. He didn't look at the book, didn't look at the class. He looked directly into me, studying every word I spoke, every breath I took. By the time I finished, my throat was dry, and sweat had gathered on my palms. "Good," he said simply, and then turned away. No smile, no encouragement, just a flat approval that somehow felt like a warning. It was after that moment that I started noticing things. Small things, but strange enough to keep me awake at night. The way he would stand completely still at the end of class, his head tilted slightly as though he was listening to voices only he could hear. The way his fingers lingered too long on the chalkboard, scratching strange marks that weren't part of the lesson. Sometimes, I could swear I saw him staring out the window, not at the playground or the passing cars, but at nothing, as if he were waiting for something invisible to appear. One day, I stayed late to finish copying notes. The classroom emptied, footsteps echoing down the hallway until the building grew silent. As I packed my bag, I realized Mr. Harrow was still there, standing at his desk with his back to me. He hadn't moved in several minutes. I thought he might not have noticed me still there, so I cleared my throat and said, "Sir, I'm leaving now." He didn't respond. Not even a twitch. He just stood there, hands resting flat on the desk, his shoulders rising and falling slowly. I hesitated at the door, half expecting him to say something. Then suddenly he whispered, so softly that I almost thought I imagined it, "They never leave." I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. "Excuse me, sir?" I asked carefully. This time he turned around. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. "Go home," he said, his voice sharp and final. And so I did, running down the hall as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my ears. From that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about him was terribly wrong. And I wasn't the only one. Rumors started circling in whispers around the school. Some said he lived alone in the old boarding house at the edge of town, where lights flickered in the windows at odd hours. Others swore they had seen him walking in the cemetery after midnight, carrying a small lantern. The boldest rumor of all was that he had once been fired from another school for reasons no one dared to explain. The more I heard, the more unsettled I became. I wanted to ignore it, focus on my studies, and keep my head down. But fate doesn't work that way. If there's a dark truth nearby, it has a way of pulling you closer, no matter how much you want to escape. It happened late one Thursday evening. Rain poured hard against the windows, thunder rolled across the sky, and the power flickered in and out. Most students had left the building early because of the storm, but I was stuck waiting for my ride. As I walked past the teacher's lounge, I heard voices. Curious, I leaned closer. "Not again," one voice muttered. It was another teacher, Mrs. Cole. She sounded frustrated, maybe even scared. "He promised it wouldn't happen," another whispered. And then unmistakably came Mr. Harrow's voice. "They belong to me. You know that." My blood ran cold. Belong? Who belonged to him? I stepped back too quickly and the floor creaked under my shoe. The voices stopped. Silence. Then the door creaked open, and there he stood, his shadow stretching long across the hallway. His eyes found mine instantly. "What are you doing here?" he asked softly, dangerously. I was just waiting for my ride," I stammered. His face remained still for a moment, then slowly curled into something almost like a smile, but not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that told me he knew something I didn't, something I wasn't supposed to know. "Be careful wandering these halls," he said, and closed the door again. That night I couldn't sleep. His words repeated in my head like an echo chamber. Be careful. Was it a warning or a threat? The days that followed only made things worse. Students began complaining of strange dreams after his classes, dreams where they found themselves back in his room at night, sitting at their desks, unable to move while he stood at the front, whispering words they couldn't understand. One girl in the back row claimed she woke up with chalk marks on her hands, though she swore she hadn't touched a chalkboard. At first, people laughed it off as teenage imagination. But when one boy fainted in class, his eyes rolling back as though something had drained the energy right out of him, the laughter stopped. The whole room panicked. Mr. Harrow didn't even move. He just watched calmly as if he had been expecting it. And when the boy woke up, pale and trembling, the first thing he whispered was, "He was there in my dream." By now, I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was terribly, unnaturally wrong with Mr. Harrow, and I was about to find out just how deep the darkness went. The following weeks felt like a slow descent into madness. Every day in Mr. Harrow's class became heavier, darker, as though the very air inside the room carried something toxic. Students came in silent, sat down quickly, and rarely dared to speak. His presence controlled everything. Our breathing, our thoughts, even our fear. But what unsettled me the most was the growing realization that I was becoming the center of his attention. It started small. Whenever he asked questions, his eyes almost always landed on me first. His voice would soften slightly when saying my name, dragging out the syllables as though savoring them. And then there were the notes. One morning, I opened my textbook and found a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages. My stomach dropped as I unfolded it. In neat, sharp handwriting it read, "Stay after class. We need to talk." I looked up instantly. Mr. Harrow was already staring at me from across the room. He didn't blink. That entire lesson, I couldn't concentrate. My pen trembled in my hand. My chest tightened with every tick of the clock. When the bell finally rang, students rushed out in relief, but I stayed seated, frozen, until the room was empty. He approached slowly, his shoes clicking on the wooden floor. "You've been curious," he said quietly. His tone wasn't angry, it was worse. It was calm, certain. "I've seen you watching, listening." I don't know what you mean," I whispered. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "You know exactly what I mean. Some knowledge is dangerous. Once you taste it, you can't spit it out." I felt a chill ripple through me. My voice cracked as I asked, "What knowledge?" Instead of answering, he leaned closer, so close I could feel the coldness of his breath. "You'll find out soon enough." And with that he walked away, leaving me shaken and terrified. The next turning point came from an unexpected place. The library. One rainy afternoon, desperate to distract myself, I wandered into the dimly lit aisles of the school library. The room was silent except for the steady drip of water from a leak near the window. As I searched for a book to escape into, my eyes caught something unusual. An old leather-bound journal tucked behind a row of dusty encyclopedias. Curious, I pulled it out. The cover was cracked, its pages yellowed with age. Scrawled across the first page was a name that froze me instantly. My heart raced as I flipped through the pages. The handwriting matched the note I had found in my textbook. The entries inside were disturbing. They spoke of experiments, of energy, of capturing fragments of life essence from those who were young and vulnerable. There were sketches of strange symbols, circles with intersecting lines and words in a language I couldn't understand. And then I found a chilling entry. "The classroom is the perfect ground. They come willingly. They sit still. They listen. The ritual thrives in silence." I slammed the book shut, my hands trembling. Every instinct told me to put it back and forget I'd ever seen it. But something stronger, a mix of fear and determination, made me slip it into my backpack. That night, I read every word. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Mr. Harrow wasn't just a strange teacher. He was performing something unnatural, something that fed on us. I knew I had to see it for myself. So one evening, long after everyone had left, I crept back into the school. The hallways were dark, the only light coming from the flickering emergency bulbs. My footsteps echoed as I approached his classroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open carefully and froze. Inside, Mr. Harrow stood at the center of the room, a circle of chalk drawn around him. Candles flickered on each corner of the classroom, their flames bending unnaturally as though pulled by an invisible force. He was whispering in that same strange language from the diary, his hands raised high, his shadow stretching across the walls like a monster. And then I saw them, the desks. Every seat had a piece of paper with a student's name written on it. Mine was right in the front row. My breath caught in my throat. Suddenly, his head turned sharply, and his black eyes locked onto me. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. "What are you doing?" He stepped forward, his expression twisting into something no longer human. "Learning. Surviving. They waste their lives. I collect them." I ran. My shoes squeaked against the floor as I bolted down the hallway. Behind me, I heard his calm, deliberate footsteps following, not rushing, but steady, as though he knew I couldn't escape. For days I avoided him. I considered telling someone, but who would believe me? A teenager accusing a teacher of performing rituals and stealing souls? No one. But he knew I had his diary, and he wasn't going to let me go. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of red, he cornered me outside the school gate. "You've seen too much," he said softly. "You carry my words now. That means you're mine." I tightened my grip on my bag where the diary was hidden. "No," I whispered, summoning every ounce of courage. "I'm not yours." His smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "We'll see." That night, the dreams began. I found myself back in his classroom again and again, paralyzed in my seat while he whispered from the front. The strange symbols glowed on the walls, and I felt something pulling at me, draining me. Each morning, I woke weaker, my reflection paler. I realized I couldn't wait for help. I had to stop him myself. The diary held the answer. Buried among his twisted notes, I found one passage that hinted at undoing the ritual. "The circle binds, but the mirror breaks. Reflection destroys the collector." It didn't make much sense, but it was all I had. So on the last night I returned. I carried only two things: the diary and a small, cracked mirror from my room. The school was silent, almost too silent. When I entered his classroom, he was already waiting, candles lit, the circle drawn fresh on the floor. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "Curiosity always kills the cat." He raised his hands, and the air grew heavy. My body trembled as the symbols on the walls began to glow. "Sit," he commanded, and for a moment, my legs moved against my will. But I clutched the mirror tight, forcing myself to resist. "Reflection destroys the collector," I whispered. His eyes widened, his calm finally cracking. "Where did you read that?" I lifted the mirror high. The candlelight caught its surface, and for the first time, his reflection showed. Not the man we saw every day, but something monstrous. His skin was gray, his eyes hollow pits, his mouth stretched unnaturally wide. He screamed, a sound not human, not earthly. The walls shook, the candles burst, and the chalk circle cracked. I held the mirror steady as his reflection twisted and writhed, pulling him toward it. His body began to collapse inward, like smoke being sucked into a vacuum. "No!" he shrieked, clawing at the air. "You don't understand. I am eternal." But within seconds his voice faded. The mirror shattered in my hand, and the room fell silent. Where he had stood, there was nothing. No trace. Just the smell of burnt air and the faint echo of his scream. The next morning, the school was strangely lighter. Students whispered that Mr. Harrow had left suddenly, no explanation. His classroom stood empty. The desk cleared as though he had never existed. But I knew the truth. Sometimes late at night, when I look into a mirror, I think I see him, just for a second, standing behind me, his black eyes watching, waiting. And I wonder if destroying him truly ended it, or if part of him still lingers, searching for a way back. Because one thing he said still haunts me. They never leave.